Hello again. I wanted to sit down and talk for a few minutes today about one of the trickiest parts of homeschooling our kids, and that is knowing what their needs are at any given time in their life as far as their education goes. So I have some guidelines that I've learned in my homeschooling experience, and I think that these are so valuable because we can quickly and easily recognize where our child is at in their stages of learning, and then we can adjust our homeschooling style to exactly what they need, and it'll be so much of a better experience for everybody. So let's get into why I like these phases of learning, and it comes from the Thomas Jefferson education philosophy. And Charlotte Mason also had similar views in how she looked at childhood and the different phases of learning for her curriculum style. So in the Thomas Jefferson education, I like following that. First of all, I think that the founding fathers were incredible. I look up to them so much, and I recognize that they were wise men who brought about this great nation, which has given so many people freedom that has never been known in the whole world. So to use that kind of person as my children's role model, I think, is the ideal for their education. In this philosophy, we look at the 4 phases of learning, and the first is called the core phase. So that happens from ages 0 to 7 or 8. And in this phase, we're not worrying about academics at all. And it's not a cop-out, even though I have to admit, I was like, oh, I don't have to do anything for homeschool when I first heard about this. But I was very wrong, and we did end up staying quite busy, even though we didn't push academics with our kids at this young age. We did provide resources for them, which led to them learning. For example, an in-law that knew that we were homeschooling bought us these wonderful workbooks called Explode the Code, and it helped my kids learn handwriting, which they loved. I didn't have them do it every day for a set amount of minutes, nothing like that. They would beg me for their Explode the Code books, seriously. It was a great learning tool, and it wasn't forced or required at that young age. The principles that we do want taught to our children during this core phase are super important because they're a foundation for everything your kids will do throughout the rest of their lives. And this is the best time to teach them when they're young and impressionable and they want to please you, and maybe not all the time, but sometimes they're more likely to want to please you. So what we want them to learn is the difference between right and wrong. We want them to learn the value of being honest and the value of hard work. And we do that through everyday activities, through anything we normally do. Preparing meals, laundry, sweeping, picking up toys when we're done, visiting with friends at the park and sharing, taking turns, being obedient, all of those things that you probably already teach your kids anyway. That is the focus of the core phase. And above all, we want to develop good relationships with our kids. We should be loving and supportive in all the things that they go through, because that is the key to having successful homeschool in the future. The second phase is the love of learning phase. And one thing that I want to mention here is that it's called the love of learning phase not because your child will enter the phase with the love of learning necessarily, even though they probably will, because that's how kids are. But it's called love of learning because we want that to be the end result by the time your child's leaving the phase. So if your kids are pushing back and you're struggling and they don't want to do assignments you're giving them at this age, it might be time to step back and focus more on inspiring them rather than pushing requirements. Rachel DeMille writes that if you feel that instinct to push your kids, which so many of us have because chances are we've gone through the public school system, and that's been ingrained in our minds, is that at this age they're doing this and that and that and that, and workbooks and tests and passing and getting hundreds, okay? That's how our minds have been trained to think, but at this age, that's not necessarily where we want to go with our kids. But if we're feeling that urge, then we should apply that to ourselves. Push a demand for academic success on yourself. Push the need to learn more on yourself. And as we do more and succeed and experience the thrill of that joy of learning something, and our kids see that, that is where they get inspired. And that is the key in this phase. Another important aspect of the love of learning phase is providing the opportunity for the kids to be exposed to lots of different subjects, lots of different learning materials. They will want to learn, okay? We're not pushing the academics on them, but they'll beg for it if we're inspiring them. They won't necessarily beg for every single subject, and there might be some that we need to think of creative ways to get them to even try, like math or writing, but there are ways to do that, and I've got blog posts about those, so I'll link to them below. So read those articles that I have there. They're super helpful with great tips on teaching math and writing and history, things that not all kids necessarily gravitate towards, but we do want them exposed to that because that might be their passion after all, but they would never know if we don't get them to try using some of these creative ways that kind of tricks them into learning. So what we want to do is let our kids try out their passions, try out things they're interested in, and provide resources around the house, leave books, leave games. This is a technique called strewing. And you leave things out and let your kids get bored. Don't worry about structuring their whole day. Give them some time where they need to find something to do, and then they'll pick up these learning things. Another important part of making an environment that's conducive to learning is limiting the screen time and the other distractions like video games, even playing with friends. That can get excessive and eat into the time that our kids should be spending doing learning activities. Okay, so of course during the love of learning phase, we're also going off of the basic principles that they assimilated during the core phase of hard work, of honesty, of keeping up with household things and helping you, which is super important when you're homeschooling, because how are you supposed to be the teacher and the maid and the cook and all of that all by yourself? It's just too hard. And there's no reason for it to all fall on the parent when that is necessary information for your child to learn. It develops character, it prepares them to go out on their own someday. So at this love of learning phase, it's a wonderful time to help them master skills like cooking and budgeting, laundry, yard work. Of course, keep it within their skill level, and we don't want fingers cut off. Be there to help them. We're not just abandoning them and leaving them on their own, but we are their guide to help them learn these things at this age. It's a great time to do that, and it might unlock one of their passions that they would have never even known that it was something they loved to do. Next, we have the transition to the scholar phase. And this is a really unique one because you can probably tell by the ages that it overlaps with love of learning and also with the scholar phase, which comes next. And it's different for different kids. Girls tend to transition to this new phase at a younger age than boys. You might also notice that this transition happens at a time when a lot of kids go through puberty. They do coincide, and it can be a really tricky time for children as things are changing in their bodies, changing in their world, changing in their relationships, and they can really feel confused and lost. So it's a time to be sensitive and observe how your child's doing with their schoolwork. And if they need more time in the love of learning phase, that is okay. It's really better to slow down and take things slow than it is to rush things and destroy the love of learning that you've spent years trying to build up with your child. If you feel like that has happened for your child, it is not the end. I believe in redemption, and I believe that people can change and attitudes can change, and that your children can absolutely learn to love learning again, even if something's happened that's caused them to lose that passion and that desire. Another important thing to remember about the transition phase is that your children are coming closer to adulthood, and it might be time to start treating them as such. So I read on one of the blogs I was researching that in the transition to scholar phase, what we want to do is hug our kids like they're little kids, because they are, but talk to them like they're adults, because they just about are. And I like that, because I think that's a good balance of remembering that our kids still need us. They're still young. They're not grown-up people yet, but we do need to respect them and allow them to grow and learn on their own, rather than being the helicopter parent that hovers over them and does everything and stunts that growth. So this next phase is the scholar phase, and this one's really fun because it's where your child's learning totally takes off, and it's because they want to. Now, I have to admit, my kids aren't to this phase yet, so I can't speak from experience, but I have read about it and researched, and I've talked to other parents who have gone through this. And during this phase, one key element is that of the scholar contract. So in the Thomas Jefferson education, we talk about this scholar contract, and it can look different depending on the different family, the different situations, and your goals for you or for your child. But the important thing is it's a contract. You have your end to uphold, and your child has their end to uphold. And so when questions arise of whether the child should go to a social activity or finish their schoolwork, that they have the contract to look to, and as long as they're fulfilling that contract, they can make the choices that they want, because they are reaching adulthood. They are needing to look to their inner self for that guidance and for that commitment, rather than us having to enforce the commitment for them. So I love this idea because it creates that expectation that the child can make decisions for themselves. And as far as setting goals go in the scholar phase, that's super easy, guys, because every child that's getting to 15, 16, 17, what are they thinking about? They want a part-time job so they can earn money for traveling, for cars, and things they see their peers doing. They want to decide what job they're going to have in the future. They want to apply for college and get accepted. And so these are natural inward desires that we don't necessarily have to force on them. Of course, there are going to be children that don't want those things. But if we have done our job in the previous phases of nurturing the confidence within them that they can achieve what they want to achieve and what their passions are, then we will find that they do have goals. They might not line up with what we'd want, but isn't that going to happen at any time anyway? Our children are individuals, and they're going to have their own loves and passions, and they're going to be different from what we would necessarily choose. But that's okay. That's part of being a parent. We've got to learn to deal with that. And I'm not looking forward to that day. I know it's coming. And I'm going to be eating my words when I watch this video on that day. As our kids near adulthood, we've got to be ready to let them make those choices, let them make those goals. And when they set goals like that, like get accepted to this university, or get accepted for a job, or be able to travel because I have this amount of money that I've earned from this job. Those are specific measurable goals that we can then set up the shorter term goals that will allow them to arrive to their overall goal in the end and where they really want to be. Okay, so the last phase, I won't spend too much on it because it's pretty self-explanatory, but it is important because guess what? We're all in this phase, or we should be, and it's the depth phase. That occurs during what we would normally think of as the college years and then throughout all of adulthood. And that's where we pick a topic, and again, it comes back to making goals, like I mentioned a minute ago, of where you want to end up. You want to have a job doing this and be a successful whatever at this profession. Or do you want to be able to travel? And so in order to do that, you have to earn enough money. So we should all have goals. And our goals should push us to challenge ourselves and to progress and become better people, to learn more, to gain new skills. And that really never goes away, does it? Or it shouldn't. And hopefully we've done our job as parents in our other phases, or if we haven't, start now and work towards having your children ready for that depth phase. Or if nothing else, you focus on getting yourself into that depth phase of learning and continue. And your children will see that and they will be inspired by that. They will see learning as something that brings joy to our lives, and they will want to learn, and your homeschool will be a success. Thank you again for watching. Let me know what ways you use these phases of learning in your homeschool, and ask any questions that you might have that I could address in a future video. Please like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.